Okay, let's turn to Luke chapter 1. We're going to read from verse 5. In the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah of the division of Abijah, and he had a wife from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking blamelessly in all the commandments and statutes of the Lord. But they had no child, because Elizabeth was barren, and both were advanced in years. Now, while he was serving as a priest before God, when his division was on duty according to the custom of the priesthood, he was chosen by lot to enter the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And the whole multitude of the people were praying outside at the hour of incense, and there appeared to him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And Zechariah was troubled when he saw him, and fear fell upon him. But the angel said to him, Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John. And you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great before the Lord, and he must not drink wine or strong drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's wombs. And he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the father to the children, and the disobedience to the wisdom of the just, to make ready for the Lord, a people prepared. And Zechariah said to the angels, How shall I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife is advanced in years. And the angel answered him, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I was sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. And behold, you will be silent and unable to speak until the day that these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time. And the people were waiting for Zechariah, and they were wondering at his delay in the temple. And when he came out, he was unable to speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the temple. And he kept making signs to them and remained mute. And when his time of service was ended, he went to his home. After these days, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months she kept herself hidden, saying, Though the Lord has done for me in the days when he looked on him to take away my approach among people. Today, I want to talk about something that could be interesting to some people. It could be boring to other people, but some things that you might not familiar with. But I'm going to talk about it anyway. Obviously, as I was actually just mentioning the story of Luke and how different it is from Matthew and Mark, and Luke added a lot of the stories that was not recorded in Matthew or Mark. So, the story that we're just reading here about Zechariah is not recorded anywhere else, especially in the Synoptic Gospel, which I mentioned that Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the Synoptic Gospel, which has the same perspective. Even though Matthew and Mark has like almost 90% of overlapping story, Luke has 30 different stories that are not recorded neither in Mark or Matthew or even in John. So there's a very unique, and there's the details of the story that we could not find anywhere else. And one of those areas that we will find is the story of Zechariah when he went to serve the temples and what he experienced and what really happened. So Luke describe all the details here. And when we talk about the birth of John the Baptist, this is the only place we're going to find. John the Baptist is a very important person to really just understand because he's the one who was sent to prepare Jesus' way. And he's a very important person to remember. And as we go through the story of this, we obviously talk about Jesus' birth. Last month was December, and then, we celebrated Christmas. And always the Christmas time in December is always exciting month, right? Even though we have many holidays and even though we have many, events during the throughout the years, when you think about it, Christmas season is probably the most exciting months for most of the people. They're probably most active. There's lots of trees, lots of Christmas shoppings and gathering. There's always a celebrations. There's all kinds of things that are happening in December. So December has always been a very, very exciting month for almost everyone, whether they're Christians or not Christian, right? And as we talked about Christmas, which is December 25th, is this the day that Jesus was born? And as I mentioned many times, no, it's not the day. It's not the day that Jesus was born. And I mentioned many times about it. So people like me always curious about things that nobody else has any interest. And I always curious about things that no one seemed to care and no one seemed to have any interest whatsoever. So I actually did some research as well and trying to just try to figure it out when Jesus was really born. Obviously, there's no way that we can discover when Jesus was born, right? However, you will find something here in the news that we always find something, very ancient. Then they said, oh, what we discovered was like almost 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years ago, right? Or we found something that was, was used in, 5,000 years ago. Sometimes you ask questions. How do you know it's actually 5,000 years old? How do you know this was 10,000 years old? How do we know this is 1,000,000 years old? How do we know? When we read those news, we just believe, oh, the scientists must have actually did whatever they did to figure out this was like, a few thousand years ago or 100 years ago. It's like, they discover something, right? We just believe in it. But do you know how they actually calculate those? Do you know how they say why? Not why, but how they actually discover this, whatever they found was like 5,000 years or the 10,000 years. So there is different methodology. There's scientific methodology that they use to, to calculate how old this is. Not many people really know how they actually figure this out. The more you actually get to learn the science, the more more you will actually find interesting and how science is not something that we should not wholly trust. Why? Because when we actually have these things figure this out, we always use some presumption. So they have to use a different methodology to figure things out. So, based on scientific fact, we say that, oh, Earth is actually formed, and the age of this Earth is what, 5 million years old, right? How do we know it's 5 million years old? According to the scripture, based on some calculations we can do, what is the actual age of this earth? Based on what you know. How old is this earth from the time was it created?
How the science say it is?
No. How do we, what the Bible say?
I've heard 60,000.
60,000.
That's what I've heard.
Okay. 60,000. How about others? You can say, I don't know.
Really not.
Literally no idea.
Since the beginning of time, there was God.
Actually, Bible gives us idea and gives us years almost. Based on the Bible, from the time that Adam was there in the Garden of Eden, when you actually go to the Genesis chapter 5, right? Genesis chapter 5 talks about the descendants of Adam, right? Their names, how long they lived, right? The people who lived almost 1,000 years, right? When you actually calculate this, let me see if I actually have a chart. I don't know if you can see this. You see this? May not be actually as clear as you want, but this is actually the graph that I drew based on the Bibles from the chapter 5. This is actually how actually you figured it out, how long they lived and how many years had passed, right? You see, the thing is, I do weird things, right? That nobody has any interest. And then, based on that, we're literally living little over the little over 6,000 years from the birth of this earth, when Adam was created. It is actually, when you actually read the Bible very carefully, you will tell how old this is. Assuming that you start from the year zero on the day that Adam was created. And then you calculate their sons, how long they lived, and you count down the years. So when you actually just calculate this, you will find a lot of interesting facts. Let me see. I think I did share this with people when I was going through Genesis. And this is one of the things that, Anisha always complained that when she was listening to my recordings, I'm showing people like different things and pictures and other stuff, and she couldn't really figure it out what I was showing people. But for those of you who's been, having Bible sharing with me, I share a lot of the maps and pictures and, a lot of stuff, right? Let me see if I can find. Let me share my screen. Do you see my screen? Nope. Do you see my screen? Yes? No? So from the time, right, how long he lived, right, assuming year zero, see if I can actually make it bigger.
You can actually spin on your. You go in Zoom if you have.
No, I'll just make it here. You see better? You see a little better?
I'm okay.
Okay. So literally, Adam was the first generations, right? And we literally, do the calculations as to like how long he lived. And you subtract it from the times, from AD. You go backward from year one, how long they lived. So when you do the calculations, you'll be able to figure it out exactly what I did with my chart, similar to, the years that you go back from AD 1 all the way back. So from when you actually calculate it back, Adam was actually, going back only 4,000 years, according to the scripture. So if you subtract 4,000 years from the AD back to the Adam's day, and you can count how many years in 2026 we're living in, right? Which is a little over 2,000 years. So when you actually combine those things, literally only 6,000 plus years. That's it. Which contradicts with the science that telling us, oh, we found some things or the bones or like, what was used like million years old. Well, how do you actually just figure that? And of course, I have the answer for that one too. But what science calculate versus what Bible shows is a little bit different. So according to the scripture, it literally shows exactly how long this earth, or from the time when Adam was created. I could show you different things here. Like for example, when you actually look back here, You see this? And it's very similar to what I drew. From the time Adam, Seth, Enoch, when you actually count them down and how long they lived, you can see exactly when the flood happened. Right here. From the time, assuming that Adam's was year 0, you count them down how long they lived, and we know exactly what year that actually flood happened. We can calculate that. That's very simple. It doesn't require a whole lot of complex mathematics. It literally, all you need is addition. That's all you need. You just have to add it up, and you come to this math, literally. So we know exactly what year it happened, right? So now, this might not be actually an interesting fact that people want to know, and then you probably start to think like, why is Key talking about this from the years and all of a sudden talk about this stuff? And there's a reason. So, when you actually think about this, and I talked about what year that Jesus was born, and when was Jesus was born? Do we know? And if we don't know, how do we know? Then that's something we're gonna kind of like look through it, see if we can find any facts. So let me see if I actually have. Oops. Okay. So when you turn to the book of Luke, we'll find some clue here. Let's find out what clue we can find it here. When you look in verse 5, in the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, one of the division of Abijah. And he had a wife from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. What we will find here is Zechariah was the priest at the time, and he was in the division of Abijah. And people really don't care about what division he's from, right? But this is a very important clue. How many divisions are there in a priesthood? Do you know? How many divisions are there? Well, most likely, you don't even realize that there was a division in the priesthood because nobody cared. No one really paid attention to how many divisions are there. When you turn to Second Chronicle, Second Chronicle, chapter 24. No, not Second Chronicle, sorry. It's a First Chronicle, chapter 24, not Second. First Chronicle, chapter 24. First Chronicle, chapter 24. The division of the sons of Aaron were these. The sons of Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Itamar. But Nadab and Abihu died before their father and had no children. So Eleazar and Itamar became the priest with the help of Zadok, of the sons of Eleazar and Ahimelech of the sons of Itamar, they organized them according to the appointed duties in their service. Since more chief men were found among the sons of Eleazar than among the sons of Itamar, they organized them under 16 the head of father's house of the sons of Eleazar, and 8 of the sons of Itamar. They divided them by lot, all alike, for there were sacred officers and officers of God among both the sons of Eleazar and sons of Itamar. And the scribe Shemaiah, the son of Nathaniel, a Levite, recorded them in the presence of the king, and the prince of Zadok, the priest of Ahimelech, the son of Abiathar, and the heads of the father's house of the priests of the Levites, and one father's house being chosen for Eleazar, and one chosen for Itamar. The first lot fell to Jehoiarib, the second of Zediah, the third is Harim, the fourth is Sorim, the fifth of Malkijah, the sixth of Mijamin, and the seventh is Hakzog, the eighth of Abijah. Now we see this Abijah on the 8th division. When you actually look at this division, there are 24 divisions. So, in the priesthood, they have a different service and they have a different terms. And this was organized by David, how to structure this based on the sons of Eleazar and sons of Itamar, and they actually figured it out how to actually divide. So each division has a cycles when they go into the temple and service in the temple. So they take turns. So what happened is, not every priest to go in whenever they want to go in, but each of the descendants of Aaron's, and whether this is from the Eleazar's, the descendants of Eleazar, or the descendants of Itamar, they actually go into certain terms to service them. So this is why Zechariah was actually going into the certain time to service in the temple. So they have to know exactly when their times are and who will be going into the temple to service in the temple. So when you think about this, what you will find is some of the interesting fact that we may find it here. As I mentioned, Israel used different calendars than we use. Remember I mentioned that they have a different calendar? How many calendars does the Israelites use? How many years? How many calendars does Jewish Israelites use? You don't know? Did I ever teach? They have two calendars. What kind of calendar do they use? They have one calendar, which is they have a religious calendar, and the other one is a civilian calendar. And how is it different from two calendar? And where these two calendars came from? Who created it? Let me see if I can actually share the calendar here. I think we actually gone over this many times, but I'm gonna show again. Uh, mm, Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen again. I share this calendar multiple times, right? This is um, this is actually the um, religious calendar that Israelites use or the Jewish use. All right. So Israel had their own civilian calendar they've been using. And God actually gave them different calendar than what they were using. When did they actually when did God actually give them a new calendar? Let's turn to Exodus. Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12. When you turn to Exodus chapter 12, this is how it reads. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the Lord of Egypt, this month shall be for your beginning of months, it shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month every man shall take a lamb according to their father's house, a lamb for a household. So what this is, that God, excuse me, God actually told Israelites to make whatever that month they're in to be the first month of the year. Then what month was that? What month is that he told Moses to change this month to the first month of the year? So I want to tell you this. There's civilian calendar versus their religious calendar. There is 7 months gap. What it means is that the month they were in chapter 12 is on their 7th month. And then God changed that 7th month to be the first month of the year. This is when they started to have new calendar, because God told them to use a different calendar than what they were using. They were using civilian calendar, but all of a sudden God told the Israelites through Moses, I want you to make this month to be the first month of the year. So if you actually think about this for a moment, we're in January. January 1st is the new year, right? When is the New Year for Jewish people? When is the New Year for Jewish people? What does actually Jewish people say on New Year? What is that? I don't know. I don't know because I'm not Jewish. Well, I'm sure you heard of Rosh Hashanah, right? Rosh Hashanah. You know what Rosh Hashanah mean?
Happy New Year.
No. Rosh means head. Hashanah means the year. Rosh Hashanah means head of the year, which means New Year. Do you know when Rosh Hashanah is? Does anybody know when Rosh Hashanah is? If you're growing up in schools, where there are many Jewish people in the community, you took that day off. And do you know what day that was? You don't know, right? You just knew that you took that day off, right? It's not a fixed day. You change every year. You change every year. However, that Rosh Hashanah is actually the day of Feast of Trumpet. It's the same day. The Feast of Trumpet and the Rosh Hashanah is exactly the same day. And that is, according to this calendar, when you actually look at this calendar, now what you will see is this. Trumpet blessed. You see this? When is this? That's the month of Tishri. When is the month of Tishri? Is from our calendar is between September and October. As you can see here, Tishri month runs from the middle of September through the middle of October. This is the month that between the end of September or the middle of September through the middle of October, there are 3 different important feasts. So that month, if you're living in a community where many of the Jewish people live, business closes during that time, because there is the Feast of Trumpet, and also there's a Day of Atonement, and there is also Feast of Booth. They're all 3 feasts are in the same month of Tishri. When you think about the Tishri month, that's the 7th month. So this, you see this, Nisan, and you will see the little word here, Abib. Let me see if I can actually make it a little smaller. You see this Abib here, the small words? But there's also Nisan. This is the name of the month. Nisan, Iyar, Shiban, Tammuz, Ab, Elul, Tishri. So this is the first month, Nisan month, or it's called Abib month. Abib month is before Israel came back from Babylon. They used to call Abib month. After they came back from Babylon, they start to call Nisan month. So you will see it's used interchangeably, but it's the same month. Abib month or the Nisan month is exactly the same month. So Nisan month is the first month. But this was literally 7th month. What it means is that Tishri was supposed to be the 7th month, but God told Moses, I want you to make this month to be the 1st month. So this used to be Abib, or the Nisan month, used to be the 7th month, but God changed that to be the 1st month, according to Exodus chapter 12. So there's a 7-month difference between civilian calendar versus religious calendar. There's a 7 months difference. So if you add 7 months or subtract 7 months, that is actually the difference between the civilian calendar versus the religious calendar. This is why Tishri month supposed to be their 1st month based on their civilian the calendar, but since God changed that to be the Abib was the 1st month, that's why they still continue to have Rosh Hashanah to be the 1st month, according to their civilian calendar. You see the difference between the two? You already get confused, right? I didn't go any in depth yet, but you always get confused. What? Oh yeah.
Tishri is the 1st month?
Yeah, this is when the Rosh Hashanah happens, right? So when they have a New Year's, they go by the civilian calendar. That's why they have the 1st month of the year is in between the September and October, because that's based on their civilian calendar. But based on their religious calendar, Tishri is not a 1st month. Abib, or the Nisan month, is the 1st month. Because God changed it and told Moses, I want you to make this month. This month was Abib month, or the Nisan month. And God told him to make that month as the 1st month, which is about 7-month difference.
So that is the religious calendar?
That's a religious calendar. So,
and then the Abib, you said, is the civilian one?
No. Abib and Nisan, the same thing. That's a religious calendar to be the 1st month. Tishri month, supposed to be based on the civilian calendar, that's the 1st month. But that became a 7th month because God swapped it 7 months. So there's a 7 months difference between their civilian calendar versus their religious calendar. So they have to remember both of them because now they have 2 different calendars to follow. Okay, which calendar should we be using? Religiously, they use the religious calendar, which God told them to use. Right? So every feast is based on the religious calendar. But at the same time, they still use the civilian calendar for other things, not related to religious matters. So they have to keep these 2 calendars to figure it out what month, which day, they will be actually doing, whatever they're doing.
So they're all the same month, it's just time then?
There's 7 months difference between the 2 calendars, all you have to remember. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know it's confusing.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. It does actually.
Just know there's a difference. Okay? Then I'll give you, this is not the big, this is just the beginning of this confusion. We haven't even gone to like complex piece of
But if I need to understand before I get clear.
Yeah, understand. So once again, you're not going to hear this kind of stuff from your church for sure, because none of the Bible study is going to talk about these stuff. All right, so I'm going to get into little complex stuff today. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to know everything what I did tell you, but you just know, there's some different things are happening there. That's all you have to remember. Okay, but I tell you in detail anyway. Nobody calculates the number of years and when this from the time when Adam was created versus until now. Nobody talks about it, but just know, hey, according to the scripture, from the day that Adam was created till now, it's only 6,000, a little over 6,000 years. It's not 60,000. It's not 1 million. It's not 10,000 years. It's not multi-billion years old. No, not according to the scripture. It's only 6,000 years, a little over 6,000. Okay?
Those are all based on theory, right? Actually, can't prove.
According to the scripture is what I said.
Yeah.
If you actually do the calculations, if you actually number them and do all this additions, you will know exactly how long this happened according to the scripture. That's how you calculate. So, as I mentioned, we're living in 2026, right? So we go by either BC or AD, right? Before Christ and Anno Domino is what we actually figured out what year we're living in. We're living in the year 2026. So then, how about the Hebrew calendar? What year is this in 2026? Well, obviously, you have no idea what year that is, right? I'll tell you. According to the Hebrew calendar, the year that we're living in 2026 is 5,786. 5,786 years is 2026. Then you go like, what? So how did they come to actually to year in 5,786? And this is what I'm going to talk about today. And what does that mean? And how do they actually calculate all this stuff? So you're gonna find some stuff that may be interest to you or may not be interested to you. But like I mentioned,
So the Israelites right now, or the Jews, they believe that 5,786.
That's correct. That's correct. And they have to calculate that. Why? Because in order for them to know, remember I told you that like Rosh Hashanah is not fixed day. It's not like the New Year's Day or the Thanksgiving Day or the Christmas Day. It is fixed day, sort of. At least on Thanksgiving, the November, the Thursday on the first week, the last week, right? That's fixed. December 25th is Christmas Day. January 1st is the New Year's Day. It's a fixed day, right? But Jewish calendar continue to change every year. They have to know exactly what year this is. So in order for them to figure out what is the day of that each feast day, because those day of the feast is changing every day, every year. So somebody has to keep track of exactly what year we're living in, what day is the day of the feast. They have to calculate that every year. So they have to actually go in their Hebrew calendar. Oh, in this year, when is our Rosh Hashanah? They have to know, right? So someone publishes this year in the year 2026, Rosh Hashanah is this day. So they have to continue to calculate this day to figure it out what is the day of the month. What is the day of the month for this particular feast day? So they have a very complicated calculations they do to figure it out the feast day. Well, that's what we're going to get to. That's what we're going to get to. That's the kind of area where you get like, what?
Bring it on, Keith.
Bring it on. Okay, I'm going to bring it on. All right, so you're going to get the, little confusions, but just bear with me. So I'll go over some of the details with you, and you would understand what I'm talking about going forward.
You have charts and stuff?
I have some. So actually, let me see if I can actually show. This is something I'm going to show you. Show you later, but let me see if I can actually Let me see if I can actually open this up. Uh, so let me see if I can share my screen. Hey, do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Hang on 1 second. Well, obviously you will not know because you will see some Koreans and you see this. This is kind of calculations that I do, and there's some math that I do. You know, I got nothing better to do, so I do just a little bit of math to figure out what this is and then how this works and stuff like that. So this is to kind of figure it out what year Jesus was born and what month he was born, and I do the calculations and figure this out. So you don't need to know what I did and what I was working on. That's not important, okay? But I'm just kind of showing you there is some calculations that I did, and this is actually in the resources, the informations that I posted on my the Google Drive. It's there. So if you're interested, you can go ahead and look it up. You just don't know the information is available. So what I'm going to tell you is this. Um, um, let's see if I can, which one I'm going to talk about this for a moment. So let me see. Okay. In order for me to just talk about this kind of calculations, there are some things that you have to know. So what you really need to understand is this. Have you ever heard of what it's called metonic cycle? Like you probably don't know what metonic cycle is. And once again, this information is in my reference folder. So if you want to look it up, it's there. Yeah. So we use solar calendar that right? The calendar that we use is solar calendar. And there's what is called lunar calendar, as you also know, right? But we don't use typically lunar calendar, but we are familiar with more of solar calendar, even though we kind of understand what lunar calendar is. Okay? Solar calendar and lunar calendar. Do you know there is a difference between solar calendar versus lunar calendar? Right? At least you know. You don't know exactly what, but there is a difference between a solar and a lunar calendar. But there are times that actually they're kind of getting very close to each other between the solar calendar versus lunar calendar. Do you know when the cycle that happens? It's like you're going back to the science class, right? Yeah. There are times that solar calendar and lunar calendar, they're kind of like getting very close to each other. So when between the solar calendar and the lunar calendars got very close to each other, there's a cycle. That cycle comes to a very close to each other between these two calendars comes every 19 years. 19 years. When the 19th year comes, lunar calendar and a solar calendar, they came very close to each other. Their cycles happened every 19 years. That is Metonic cycles, what I mentioned. Now you know what that is. Okay? But let's get into a little more complicated than that. And the 19th year we called tropical year. 19th years we called tropical years. This tropical year, we call it, since they're kind of like matched, they're very, getting close to each other, they called synodic month. You don't need to remember any of this, what I'm telling you. Just like, oh, there's something is there. Okay, just, he told me like, there's a 19 years, like, cycles between the solar years and lunar year. You just need to know what those are. And then this was actually started, back in BC 433. And there is a guy named Meton, and he's the one who actually found this Metonic cycles. That's why we actually went after his name, because he discovered this. Then we actually use called Metonic cycles, that every 19th year, the solar calendar and the lunar calendars are meeting. And this, in China, had their own calendar way before that time. So they had their own history of how they're calculating this Metonic, the cycles as well. So, like, almost in BC 700 somewhat years, Chinese was started using those kind of like already their own cycles to figure out how this works. And as way you probably know, there is way that they calculate, but they're almost the same. They actually come to the same cycle. Oh, 19th years, that's how they figured this out. So they both found this different ways, but they found a way that every 19th years, it's actually they're matching. So, let's just talk about this for a moment. I mentioned about the 19th year is called the tropical year, right? This tropical year is, it takes a time that Earth completes one orbit around the sun. Once again, you don't need to know everything. You don't have to remember anything what I just tell you. Just hear it, okay? It's called the tropical years, and almostly completely like coincide, corresponding to 19 tropical years. That cycles that runs around the Earth, runs around the sun. This this nearly matches the least common multiple of tropical years, and the moon synodic month is called the or you don't need to know what it's called, but it's actually happening every 19th years. So you have to understand how they're actually this tropical year and synodic month is happening, because every month has a different days. Because of that different days and how we count it, it gets very confusing, because, and why one month is like 29 days, another month is 30 days. So even with our own calendars, we have some month that has a 30 days and some month has 31 days. Another, February has a 29th day, some year has a 28 days. Those number of days changing every month, right? You don't really care why is it ending certain days as 31 days and 30 days and 28 days and 29 days. We just don't know. We just look at the calendar, and that's how we count it. We don't know how they come up with those numbers, but we just know we use the calendars. That's why we actually check the calendar every year, but we just don't know how they come to that days. So scientists always have to calculate, because they have to figure it out times, because there's a cycles that happens all the time, but we need to figure out, they kind of have to squeeze into that timeline in order to figure it out what month, what day, what time it is. It's all coming from the calculations. That's a mathematical calculations. We have to figure it out how we live every day of our lives. We just don't know what's happening in the background. We just use the calendar, we just use our watch, and that's how we know what month it is, what day it is, and then what time it is. That's how we figure things out. But we don't know exactly how we came to that conclusion. Right? So now you have some ideas that there is some differences between every month and every days is a little bit different. So what we're going to figure it out is, depending upon solar years and depending upon the lunar years, and there is also the what the I forgot what they call. Let me see what they call. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can find this. I forgot what they call, but there's another the calendar. So based on our solar calendars, 1 month we usually count 30 days. Typically, that's how you see each month is almost 30 days. In solar, not like solar years, there's lunar years. 1 month is 29 days, 0.53, or there are more, the numbers behind. So when you actually calculate it based on the solar years, how many days that we have in a month, the year? 365 days. Right? We count the 365 days is 1 year, right? But it's not exactly the 365 days, but there are more the digit behind that 365, but we just ignore that, right? Anything below the decimal points, we just ignore it. We just count the 365 days. Based on the lunar years, because the lunar years has 1 month is 20.29.5305 days, they count the number of year is 354 days, which there is a difference between 365 days versus 354 days, right? So almost there is 0.5 days difference between every month. But if you actually those calculated in a year, there's about 11 days difference between solar years and lunar years. Almost 11 days difference. So then if you count the number of years, that the gap between the solar years and lunar years is going to be continued to grow. So they're never going to match. So they have to do some calculations, try to figure out how to bring this solar years and lunar years together. So what they did is, in order for to calculate those solar year, lunar years are the same days. So the first year, we have 355 days. Second year, 355 days. Third year, 384 days. Fourth year, 353 days. Fifth year, 355 days. And every year is different. And when it reaches the 19th year, that's when it matches. 19th year. So they have to insert some days to figure it out how to actually bring this together. So every 19th year, 6,940 days are coming together. So every 19th year, based on the religious calendar, remember, 6,940 days. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is, once again, I don't need you to write this down or do any calculations. I don't need you to do anything, or you don't have to remember anything what I just said. Just kind of hear it as, okay, all right, there's some stories are there, okay? So from BC 1446 years till BC 9. 1446th year to BC 9th year. So then, okay, how do we actually come up with this years? This is how we're trying to figure it out, what month that Zechariah get into the temple to service. That's how we're trying to figure it out, when he actually get into that, month. Because the difference is between John the Baptist was born and Jesus was born, there's only 6 months difference because they're cousin, right? John the Baptist and the Jesus, they're cousin. Their only difference is 6 months apart. So if you can figure it out when John the Baptist was born, based on what we see in the book of Luke, then we'll be able to figure it out. Plus 6 more months, that's when Jesus was born. So if we can figure this out, then we'll be able to figure it out when Jesus was born, what month, right? You see where it's going to figure this out? Once again, I don't know if anybody has any interest whatsoever about what I did, Okay, so remember we actually talked about this, when God told Moses, this month, I want you to make this month to be the first month, right? And that it was the Abib month, because God forced them to make this Abib month be the first month of the year based on the religious calendar. Because they're serving, all the priests are serving in the temple, they go by the religious calendar, not go by the civilian calendar. So we have to calculate based on the religious calendar, not the civilian calendar. So, based on the calculation, 1446th year, the BC, I'm talking about 1446th year is the year that God told Moses to make this calendar change. So this BC 1446th year was the year that God told Moses to make this calendar to be the religious calendar. So then, how do we calculate from 1446th year to BC 9? And why do we do it? So if you actually calculate that between those two, 1446 year to the BC 9, they're about 525,253 days. Total days between 1446 through BC 9. The total days are the 525,253 days. When you actually,
so 1,440 God told Moses calendar, and then what was BC 9?
BC 9 is what we're trying to figure it out, what year that Jesus was born. So I'm going to tell you why, because think about this. We calculate the AD based on, so before AD was BC, the before Christ, and AD was after Christ, literally, right? That's how we come to 2026. But this calendar is wrong. This calendar is wrong to begin with. And if I have to get to that, we need another time to really go over why there's time difference, okay? But we know that Herod ordered his people to kill the children of Israel under 2 years old, right? Now, when Maggie came over to actually met Jesus and gave that gift to him, right? From the time that Herod told his people to kill the babies under 2 years old, that means from the time that Herod met Maggie, when they actually came to Jerusalem and asked them, where is the king of Israel was born, right? He asked them, from the time that Maggie came to Herod, from the time that Herod told his people to kill anyone's under 2 years old, killed. That means there is a 2 years gap between the time. Okay? Do you understand what I'm talking about, the 2 years gap? Now, Herod died in BC 4. So I want you to think about this for a moment. If the Herod the Great died in BC 4, right? Whenever we calculate AD, that's the before Christ and after Christ. That means year 0 or the year 1 is the year that Jesus was supposed to be born. But that's not true because Herod died on BC 4. So then we have to calculate BC 4 is the day that he died. That means BC 4 is not the year that he ordered people to kill the 2 years old. So you have to go back 2 years back. So that means already BC 6. Right? At least the minimum. If Herod ordered, if he died in BC 4, it could have been BC 5 that he ordered, right? It could be BC 6. We don't know. We're just basing on year that he died. He died on the 3rd month of the BC 4, according to historian. Okay? Assuming, yeah, that's what we know as a history. Okay?
Why would they say he died BC 4, but BC is supposed to be before Christ? Why would they?
Once again, that means if you have to explain that, I have to spend another time to go over why there's a difference, and then I'll set aside for that one. If you're curious, I can go over. It's actually materials are in there in the reference to folder, by the way.
It is interesting.
Once again, this is a story you will never hear from anywhere else, okay? Anyway, so now you understand why actually going back to BC 9, because now you have to think about it from the time that the Herod died, from the when he actually met the Maggie, and also now you have to go back to at least a 9 months before that Jesus was conceived, right? So now you have to go back. Now you have to start to calculate from at least the BC 9 to figure it out when the John the Baptist was born. That's why it was out going back to BC 9. Okay? So now, as I mentioned, from the year that God told Moses to change the calendars, the creation of the first religious calendar, now they have to figure it out how to actually calculate how many days are there in between. So as I mentioned, 525,253 days are there. And if you divide by 7 days, which is there's a 7 days a week, there's about 75,036 weeks between that time. BC 1446 through BC 9, there is about 75,036 weeks. Okay? So based on this 75,036 weeks, now we have to figure it out from the time of the priesthood divisions, because as I mentioned, their priesthood divisions start to serve in a certain period. because there are 24 divisions. Then each division has to serve in a certain period. So you have to go back to 1446 year using the religious calendar, which is the Abib or the Nisan month is the first month of the year. You need to figure it out how many times they have to serve. If you divide by /24, which is there are 24 divisions, they have to serve in each year. If you actually divide those 75,036 weeks, divide by 24, which means each division was a serving at the temple, 3,126 times. In each division. From the time that 1446 BC to BC 9, each division have served 3,126 times. Each division. Okay? But if you actually calculate that, there is some decimal number left over. Once again, that's all in the chart that, or the spreadsheet that I showed you that did all the numbers, calculations, divisions, and multiplications, and all that stuff. There is decimal points, which is 0.5059, blah, blah, blah. There is like decimal numbers left over. And if you actually multiply 24, because there are 24 divisions, and they're about 12 weeks difference. So that 12 weeks difference, you have to change it to a day. Then if you actually change to the day, you have to multiply by 7 again. Then it comes out to be 85 days. You're going to say, like, what is the key talking about? It's like, what is he talking about? What calculation is he doing right now? I'm trying to figure it out. Hang on one second. Let me see if I can. I know I lost you guys, but once again.
When you say they served 4 divided to BC, that it was 1,000 times, 3,000. You say that number was?
That 3,126. That is when you actually, once again, let me just back up again. From the time BC 1,446 years to BC 9, all right, there are about 525,253 days when you actually calculate that. If you calculate the number of days between those 2 years, okay? And then if you divide by 7, then you will figure out how many weeks are there between those 1,446 to BC 9. That is 75,036 weeks. And because the 75,036 weeks there, then you have to, because there's a 12 months, right? You have to divide by 24 because there's a 24 divisions within 12 months. So each division has to serve in certain period during that years, because every year they have to serve. So literally they serve twice a year. Okay? Because there are 24 divisions in 12 months. So they have to serve twice, right? So you have to figure it out how many weeks they have been serving during that period that I just mentioned. If you actually just to calculate, they served about 3,126 times in each division they served between that period.
And they served twice in a year?
Twice a year. Because once again, there's 12 months and there are 24 divisions, so they have to serve twice a year. Right? You get that?
So the calendar, the religious calendar, what? Is that what you're saying?
No. Not religious calendar is always 12 months. But they have to serve beginning of the month and the latter part of the month. They have to serve in the temple twice a year because there's only 12 months, but there are 24 divisions there. So they have to serve it twice. Okay? But if you actually calculate that, there are about 3,126 times that each division was served in the temple during that period. But because there's a not exactly numbers are like positive number, there's a decimal number when you calculate it. So there's a decimal number between that period. That's about, as I mentioned, 0.505952, blah, blah, blah. There's a very long number. So you have to calculate that how many weeks that decimal number is. So I had to calculate that decimal number into the weeks. When you calculate that, if you multiply by those decimal number times 24, which is there are 24 divisions, there's about 12 weeks. And you have to translate that weeks to a days. So you have to multiply by 7, and there's 85 days. And because 85 days, and there are 12 weeks, and you have 84 days, and there's one extra days. Once again, you don't need to know what key is doing right now to turn all this math. You don't need to know all this details. What I'm saying is I did the calculations and how to actually calculate this. And coming to what I showed you before, like I saw Daisy join, like she's probably like saying like, what's going on here? She like completely.
Well, today is a math session.
Yes, today is math. So once again, so this is let me see if I can just make it bigger here. Remember the Metonic cycles that I mentioned? Okay. So every year that the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, and then this is like number of years. Remember that the Metonic years every 19th year between the solar years and lunar years to come together, right? So the first year, they actually have a 355 days. Second year is 355 days. And third year, we have a 384 days. Fourth year, we have a 353. Fifth year, 355. Sixth year is 384. So this is how they matching between the solar years and the lunar years and every 19th year that match. Okay, so each days, every years is different. It's not exactly the same. Okay, so if you calculate the number of years, the year 1 through 19, when you actually calculate that years into the days, that comes out to be 6,940 days in 19th years. That comes every 19th year. So this is the math that I did, that I was explaining to you what, from BC 9s and how many days are there, weeks are there, divisions, blah, blah, blah. So this is the math that I did to try to figure out how many days are there. Okay? So like, what the hell is this? Yeah, you don't need to know what it is. I did the math, and this is what it comes out. Okay? So now, there's two theories. One theory is, what is the month that this Zechariah went into the temple to serve? Because that's the month that he actually entered into the temples to saw the visions and heard the messenger from Gabriel, right? And from that time, right, when he actually went back to his house after the serving days was done at the temple, he went back and he found out that Elizabeth was conceived, right? That was almost 3 months she was conceived, right? So you need to figure this out, what month he was actually serving. So this is the kind of figuring out that he, which is the Zechariah, went into um, he went to the Adar month, Adar second. So let me see if I can go back here again. You see this calendar? So Abib month is the first month based on the religious calendar, right? So Iyad, Shiban, Tammuz, Ab, and Elul, Tishris, and then month goes on. The last month is Adar month. Adar month has actually there's Adar 1 and Adar 2, depending upon which year that is. Okay? I'm not going to get into that details, but so he went to Adar 2nd. That's the month that the Zechariah went into the temple. Okay? And that's when he heard the news that he actually found out that his wife, Elizabeth, was conceived from the time that he heard the news from Gabriel. Then you count the 9 month, because when women conceive a baby from the time that the baby is born, it takes 9 months, right? So based on that, if he went in, which is Adar 2nd month, which is based on our calendar, that is March. Our calendar, based on our calendar, not the religious calendar or the Hebrew calendar or the civilian calendar. We're just calculating based on our month, okay? That is March that he actually served at the temple. That is Adar 2nd month. So when you calculate that, 9 months, that's about 280 days, right? And Chislev month, which is the 9th month of the religious calendar, this is when John the Baptist was born. Based on our calendar, it's between November and December time period when John the Baptist was born. Okay? And then there are 6 months difference between John the Baptist and Jesus. So if you calculate this, if John the Baptist was conceived, Elizabeth was conceived of John the Baptist on the Adar 2nd month, that means you have to count the 6 months from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because actually it's almost at the end of the Adar month. So you have to actually start it from here. So then you count it from 6 months. This is the month that Mary conceived Jesus. And then you count another 9 months, which is 280 days, which means he was born on the month of Shivan. That month of Shivan is, from our calendar, is between May and June.
Couldn't be any more opposite.
Okay? So it's not December. Of course, there's a lot of assumption here because, we have to make assumptions that, how many days are there, how many years. There's a lot of calculations that go in to figure this out. So I also have to, based on something, so how their calendar was right and how the calendar is calculated. So I had to do a lot of math to figure this out, to really figure it out what month that Jesus was born. Once again, he had nothing to do. He was just killing his time to figure this out and how this works, right? So this is a lot of calculations that I have to do to just figure this out.
Can I confirm that I followed? So you used the key factors that Zechariah was first, Abijah. So you used that to figure out
Correct.
where we are like, because he served twice a year to know that month when you start the calculation. That's why you put all
Correct.
to know which patient is
Correct.
and then and so that's why you that all
Correct.
use that fact
Correct.
to then calculate toward where
Was correct. Because you have to start from how they're calculating this month, right? Because you have to use the religious calendar. So then you need to know exactly when that religious calendar started. Because once again, every year, Jewish people had to do these calculations every year to figure it out what is the day of the month for their feast. So they have to do these calculations every year. And I just kind of like used their calculation as a basis to figure this out. When is the month that, this, Zechariah, which is he's a division of Abijah, the terms. So I need to trace back exactly how many times they have served and when they go into the terms, because every year is different. So you need to figure it out in this year when he heard the news, which month he was actually got into the temple. So that's what I was doing all these calculations going backward, because I have to start from the very beginning.
So that division of Abijah is for
Twice a year.
and it doesn't say explicitly month.
Correct. So now you understand after you heard all this.
You could have just said he was told on this month, and then
I could have told you this is it. But I just wanted to go over all the details of how I come to this dates, and this gives us ideas, because when you think about this for a moment, I'll show you one interesting things here. Go to Genesis. Hang on 1 second. There's a lot more interesting facts on this, because I did a lot more calculations than what I just showed you before, but I'm just running out of time to explain all that to you. But take a look at the Genesis chapter chapter 7. So I had to go back to Genesis and Exodus to figure all this out. When you look at chapter 7, this is the story when, God told the Noah, when it's going to actually just to rain. So when you look at verse 11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the window of the heavens were opened. So Bible described exactly what year, right? That was the year that Noah was actually 600 years. Remember I showed you the chart, and based on the chapter 5, you can calculate how many years that had passed from the time that Adam was born, was created, to the times when Noah actually flood happens. You can calculate that number of years, exactly know what year that happened. So if you actually know what year that Noah was at age 600, you can figure out what year that was. You get that? Then it gives us which month, which day. Exactly, right? The Bible tells us. And then 40 days it rained, as you know, day and night. Correct? And when you take a look at verse 24, and the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. So now you know from the time that it rained 40 days, and then when the water was actually just like flooded, for how long it took. So it's about 150 days that had passed. And when you look at the chapter 8, but God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark, and God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subside, and fountains of the deep and the window of the heavens were closed. The rain from the heaven was restrained, and the water receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the water had abated, and in the 7th month of the 17th days of the month, the ark came to rest on the Mount of Ararat. So what happened was, when it rained, that was a 2nd month of a 17th day, right? And then when water was actually the water conceded, and when the ark reached the mountaintop, that was the 7th month and 17th day. So how many days had passed? How many days had passed? Seriously? Seriously? 7 minus 2? Like, do you have to really think? I must have fried your brain already. like, literally 5 months, right? 7 minus 5. 7 minus 2, 5 months. How many days had passed? 150 days. That means how many days of the month? How many days of the month? 30 days. So the Bible is counting every month 30 days in Genesis. You see that? Of course, nobody does this kind of math like I do right now, but I'm just showing you how Bibles actually tells us how they counted the calendar days. Right? We don't really just think about this like, oh, whatever, 150 days. So, okay, we don't care about. But we can tell how this Bible described the calendar was working in the time of Genesis. That calendar day has changed over time throughout the Bible, because it's no longer they're counting 30 days as every month. So now the days of the month have changed. Now you have to actually consider that how it changed from how many days are in the month to figure it out which divisions was going into the temple to serve, because they need to know which division should go in to serve at the temple, because they have to do all this calculation every year. Of course, at the very beginning, it took a long time for them to figure this out, but year after year it becomes easier because you just have to count it from the previous year. That's all. But I just gone through this, the whole, it's like ideas of how I came to these calculations and what really was gone in to figure this out, to figure it out what month what Jesus was born. Once again, there's a lot of assumptions here. So I'm not saying this is the month, but based on my calculations, based on all the artifact that I can discover, this is the month that I can guess that he was born. So it is not definitely December, for sure. It's more of close to spring to the summertime. All right. Any questions?